Hello, and welcome back to Lunch and Learn, the Leeds video podcast, where we take an in-depth look at the art scene here in Lincoln and the arts industry as a whole. For our final episode of the 2020-2021 season, Lunch and Learn is kicking off Pride with acclaimed poet and scholar Stacey Moore. Originally a New Yorker, Stacey is the graduate chair of the English department at UNL and has published 4 award-winning collections of poems. Stacey's most recent academic publication, Teaching Queer, is taught at over 50 colleges and universities across the United States in creative writing, composition, and gender studies courses. We'll be joining in today to discuss Stacey's work, poetry's unique sensibility for telling diverse stories, and the courage required to speak truth to power. I'm Ryan Savage, an education and outreach specialist here at the Lead, and here with me to discuss is the Lead's Education and Community Engagement Director, Jane Schermer Hansen. Hi, Jane.
Good afternoon, Ryan.
Hello. How are you doing today? Are you ready for our last episode?
It's like bittersweet, right? Because
Yeah.
I feel like we've been doing this for a year and just reflecting on everything. It's just been kind of a lot, but I'm super excited about Stacey.
Yes, and hopefully Brenna's watching. Brenna, if you're out there, our OG.
Yes, Brenna, we see you, Brenna.
Yes. Well, I'm really excited for all of y'all to meet Stacey. And before we go live, I have a clip of some of Stacey's performance poetry for y'all to get a sneak peek at some of the work we'll be seeing. This is The Kind of Man I Am at the DMV.
Mommy? Mommy, that man is a girl, says the little boy, his finger targeting the center of my back like a narrow spotlight. His kid hand learning to assert what he sees. His kid hand learning the failure of gender's tidy little story about itself. I try not to look at him because, yes, that man is a girl. I, man, am a girl. I am the kind of man who is a girl. And because the kind of man I am is patient with children, I try not to hear the meanness in his voice, his boy voice that sounds like a girl voice, because his boy voice is young and pitched high like the tent in his pants will be years later, because he will grow to be the kind of man who is a man. Or so his mother thinks. His mother snatches his finger from the air. Of course he's not, she says to her boy, pulling him back to her seat. What number does it say we are? She says, bringing his attention back to numbers, to counting, and its solid sense. But he has earrings! The boy complains, now sounding desperate, like he's been the boy who cried wolf, like he's been the hub of disbelief before, and this time he knows he is oh so right. The kind of man I am is a girl. The kind of man I am is push-ups on the basement floor, is chest bound tight against himself, is thick gripping hands to the wheel, when the kind of man I am drives away from the boy who will become a boy, except for now, while he's still a girl voice, a girl face, a hairless arm, a powerless hand. That boy is a girl. This man who is a girl thinks to himself as he pulls out of the lot, his girl eyes shining in the Midwest sun.
Yes, snaps. Where's Jane? Okay, there we go. Hey, Jane.
Yeah. Wow. Stacey is such an incredible performer.
Yes.
Yeah, I got to work with her on our Everytime I Talk About project, and I'm always just captivated.
Yeah, I love the line. I'm gonna obliterate it, so I'm not gonna like the tent pitched high line. I want to ask her about it. So, but yes, folks, I hope you enjoyed that, and I'm super excited that we have Stacey joining us live today to talk about this project, this poem, and more. And it looks like almost here. There we go. Hey, Stacey.
Hey, how's it going?
It's It's going well. It's great to have you on today, and we'll start with an easy one. Can you tell our audience a bit about what we just saw?
Sure. I mean, I write a lot of poems about gender and a lot of poems about childhood. Both of those thematics kind of appear a lot in my work. And I'm particularly, I guess, always interested in gendered spaces, the DMV being one of them. And actually, that poem was the first poem that I wrote after I'd moved to Nebraska in 2011. And it happened on a day where I knew I had to go to the DMV to get a Nebraska license. And I was very anxious because I was like, okay, well, sometimes I hand them my license, they don't look, they give me back a license that says male on it. And then I'm like, I don't really care, but some police officer might care. And so then I, then I get, so I was already ready for, a gendered experience at the DMV, but then that kid just brought it home. And the thing I love about kids is, I mean, I don't love that there was definitely, I say in the poem, a bit of meanness in the voice. But also, the interesting thing about the kid is that he's doing something with gender and language that grown-ups don't do, which is like he's, that sentence, "that man is a girl," is this sort of paradoxical, rich and interesting moment. And so, I just do a lot of observing as somebody who moves through the world and probably gets interpreted as male, maybe like 60% of the time, and female like 40% of the time. And then, you get to see things that other people don't necessarily see. You get to see the difference in the way you're treated when somebody interprets you in one way and not the other. You get to see how you're treated when somebody is confused by you, which is often anger. And so, it's always just been interesting to me to kind of narrate those moments and put them into poems. What I love about poems the most is that they can just take this moment or story that's really long and big and try to distill it, and in a performance poem, you've got 3 minutes. So it has to be, at least if you're doing a performance poem, it has to be distilled into 3 minutes. So that's what that was. And that was an actual, I don't compete much anymore. And actually, I hadn't really been competing much in 2015, but a former student of mine kind of was like, please do this. So I did.
Crowd you into it. That's awesome. I the very first time I heard that, I was like in love with it because I was watching a few of the videos that you had up like on your YouTube and everything. And like I was saying, I did are you familiar with Lemon Anderson?
No.
He's he does like performance poetry, and he came and he had like a residency at the Lead Center, and so he like worked with some of us, and I was lucky enough to work with him. And so like I had never done that stuff before, and so I had that experience. It was really cool like picking up on like how you like I just love like how you use like language and your consonants. I thought, and the pacing is just, it's just wonderful. And then especially I was saying, like, you probably saw the line about the pitch tent. I thought that was amazing, and I like watched that like 15 times just to like see the setup. And I have to ask, like, was that like something that just like really rolled off like when you're thinking of it? Because I just found it so intriguing.
Yeah, I mean, the process, usually for me is that, I often write a full draft of a poem whole, and most of the parts sort of come into play when I do that. And then I mess with it for a long time, including performing it before it's done and seeing, how I learn about a poem is I perform it live and I feel these moments where I'm like, that part's wrong, or, that rhythmically didn't feel good, or I felt like I lost the crowd right then, or that sort of thing. So I've always been interested in, even before I was interested in performance poetry proper, I've always been interested in live poetry readings, and also interested in the way, I mean, this happens with music, right? People who are music fans know sometimes you go to see a band you love and you wish you never saw them live.
Yeah.
And that happens with poets sometimes too. Like you love a poet, you love a book so much, and then you go see them read the book and you're like, I kind of liked it better in my head. And so, it always devastated me when that happened. So when I was, in my 20s and first trying to think of myself as a poet, I was like, I don't want to be one of those people that doesn't like engage with people, because poetry is meant to be an out loud experience, whether it's performance poetry or not. It's musical in that sense.
And that was something I was going to ask is do you feel like do you feel like you write differently for poems that you know are going to be like performance pieces kind of versus ones that, well, will ultimately pay, though someone could perform them, but like, do you feel like you write those differently?
No, I think I think I didn't even know I was a performance poet until another performance poet by the name of Brian Francis, a Pittsburgh poet, told me that I was, and took me to a poetry slam. I didn't really I didn't really think of it. So I don't, you know, I'm always conscious of thinking of an audience. I'm not. I mean, there are a lot of poets who say they don't, like they don't think about audience at all. They just go into a poem. I definitely came to writing, you know, thinking about trying to change people's perception. And so I'm always thinking about people and how they might hear something and thinking about that experience. And one of the things I love, you know, traveling around and giving readings and stuff is, you know, of course I make a lot of connections with queer youth and queer college students when I visit campuses and stuff. But it's also amazing to me how many people who are sort of straight and cisgender who come up to me and tell me their sort of gender tragedies, like these moments they remember where something was taken from them, or they were told they could or couldn't do something because of gender, right? You know, people remember moments that their fathers stopped hugging them, or, you know, young women remember moments that, you know, they were wearing a dress and someone really came down on them for like how they were sitting, or, you know, and there are these great tragedies of people's lives, not just those of us who are, you know, gender queer, but like of people's lives that are about like what you can and can't do because of, you know, whoever everyone else says you are. And so it's, you know, to me, that's what I guess the project is for me, is like trying to get people to take gender quite a bit less seriously. You know, to think of it as something we do, like playing tennis. It's just like, it's just like not a big deal. You know, in terms of like people sort of, you know, defending it as some sort of systemic fortress that is a real thing. You know, where it's like, we know too much now. We know it's all way more ambiguous and interesting than we thought it was in our 7th grade textbook, like both biological sex, all that kind of stuff, and gender itself as a construction. You know, it's all very messy and complex and interesting. And I think if we could have a sense of humor about that and a sense of compassion and love for other people, it would be like super simple, you know? So I hope, you know, sometimes that my work has like an impact for young queer people who are like seeing themselves, but also has an impact for people who are seeing gender and being like, you know, it does kind of work like that. And that's not, you know, that's not great. So, and I have 2 little kids. So, I mean, I see it a lot in them, even though they're raised by, you know, people who are pretty gender radical, like I see it affect them all the time.
Yeah, so to kind of where you are now, and how everything's developed, you must have started somewhere, right? So what drew you to performance and page poetry as kind of this mode of storytelling and expression?
I mean, I think as a young person, like many other queer 14-year-olds, I started writing stuff in my journal as a kid, stuff that I couldn't tell to anyone. And it was largely at that point a survival mechanism. Like I wrote a lot of stories, I wrote a lot of poems, I tried to invent, you know, worlds other than the one I was living in. You know, I always say that, like, you know, for queer people, that act of imagining the world otherwise is like how you make it, you know, particularly if you don't have access. I mean, I grew up, you know, some people think because I grew up in New York, it was some kind of paradise. Like the 80s in New York was not, it's not like you were 13, you were like, that's what I'm gay, and your family clapped. Like, that's not what happened. And so, you know, and I didn't even know what, you know, non-binary gender was or anything like that. Like I didn't even have any language for that, but I knew that I experienced myself as just sort of always perplexed, like by people's investment in gender. You know, at a very young age, I remember looking at bathroom doors, like the woman's sign and the you know, with the little dress and the men's room, and being like, why do we do this? Like, it's got to do with anything, you know? And so that was a way for me to survive, you know, survive the world as it was then, and kind of imagine myself out of it into another space so that I could, survive it and imagine that it could be otherwise. And I mean, that's largely what I hope for the students that I teach at UNL and some of the high school students that I've worked with over the years through a program called Louder Than a Bomb here in Nebraska. That power to imagine the world otherwise, that's what changes the world, and sometimes you're doing it privately and no one knows you're imagining the world otherwise until you figure out a way to, make that of value. And so, I think that for me, that's how I came to writing as a young person. I didn't think I was a poet because at the time, particularly the curriculum in the 1980s, I mean, all the poets I read in school and stuff were dead, and they were dudes that were dead. And the ones who were gay, they never talked, like no one ever talked about that Walt Whitman was a huge queer. They were just like, this is a famous poet. And you'd be like, there's something gay about this.
Yes.
And
I remember when I found that out, I was like, oh, it makes sense.
Yeah, right. I know. Now it makes sense. So I didn't think poets were like a real thing, like something you could be, until I got to college and I went to a poetry reading. And I remember somebody saying, hey, you want to go to this poetry reading? I was like, what kind of poetry reading? Like somebody's going to get up and read Shakespeare? And they're like, no, like a poet's come to campus and they're going to read from their poetry book. I'm like a live person? And then it suddenly occurred to me like, oh, people do this, I mean, there are very few poets that can make a living just, I mean, there are some performance poets and page poets that can make a living just off writing, but most of us don't. Most of us regular poets don't.
Yeah, what the thought train that you were going down there made me really think of how like the reimagining of the world is kind of, not just necessarily poetry specific, because it made me think of the line from Hadestown, which is opening on Broadway, reopening on Broadway, which is exciting here in September. But it's to the world we dream about and the one we live in now, kind of that like acknowledging that duality of being able to imagine, but also being grounded where we are too, and kind of negotiating all of that. So,
yeah, I mean, I'll shamelessly plug my own English department here at University of Nebraska, but our mission statement, like one of its biggest components is this idea of imaginative reasoning. And it's very much connected to what you're talking about, which is like that literature and language and studying language and rhetoric and literature and poetry and all the things we do in the English department, that they're not just about like books and texts, that it's about like actually coming into contact with, worlds, and coming into contact with interpretive practices that might be able to help us imagine the world otherwise, right? And that's, that is why, I mean, there have been articles of last year, like, but companies rather hire English majors for, computer things and stuff like that because of like innovation, because of their ability to like imagine an unusual solution to a complex problem. And so, I think it's, I mean, I'm, super happy every day to be working in an English department with people who, I mean, that's what all of us do every day, whether we teach, critical writing or we teach poetry or we teach, Shakespeare. Like all of my colleagues are teaching students to, imagine the world other than it is, or other than you think it is.
Yeah, when one of the things that I was thinking about when you were talking about, like every queer kid like writing in a journal, about like vocabulary and like how, having to create that vocabulary for yourself because either you didn't grow up in an environment where, those things were talked about, or like, the world, not necessarily probably in the 80s, was not caught up yet nearly to even, and, there's still lots of progress, but like even to like where we are today. And it got me thinking about like, and these are all like my beliefs, my statements, nothing with the Lead Center, but the State Board of Education is like evaluating like new standards for like health education. And they're talking about adding like sexual orientation and gender identity and discussion about STDs and whatnot to like the state health standards for education. And like, it is extremely political, unfortunately, but like how different do you think things would have been like if you didn't have to create that vocabulary for yourself? Because I always think about that, and like I'm I'm still like, I was not born in 1998. So like, and I still felt like I had to like formulate things for myself. So do you think, like, do you even think that you would have done poetry then? I guess you have to feel like it's your calling, but.
Yeah, I mean, hard to know the answer to that, though I will say that, you know, even as a parent, as an educator, and as a writer, I mean, I think the most important things for kids and teenagers is that there's a way to look around and have the thought, the life I want is possible, you know? And I think when kids feel otherwise, it's super bad. I mean, we know that. I mean, and we know that trans kids feel otherwise very often. And that's why, you know, there's still a higher suicide rate among trans youth and queer youth. And I really think that it really hinges on that feeling, you know. And I remember, I'm from Long Island, New York, and weddings in Long Island, they're a big deal, right? Big family events, they're lavish, they're, you know, they're on the beach, they're on the water, they're at these amazing clubs. You got 200 people there, and it's like food you can't even imagine, right? Like, this is how they do it back in New York. And every time I experienced that event from age 12 to 18, the experience of the event was, I'll never have this. I'll never have this with my family. So instead of my life is possible, right? It's like, it's impossible. It's impossible to be celebrated for your queer relationship. That's never going to happen. Of course, it did happen. But, you know, as a kid, I did not think that it could. And so I think that that's where, you know, where poetry and art and literature, and even now, you know, people's blogs and people's paintings, and, you know, the way people can share things digitally now, which wasn't possible when I was a kid. Then people do have more access to being like, well, my life is possible. I see this going on. I see this happening. I'll never forget the first time I saw a queer, it was Kate Bornstein, who's a famous queer activist and who's written a book called Gender Outlaw. And she was giving a talk at my like undergrad. And the moment where this room like uproared in applause for her like big queer performance, I was like, what? Like, this can like, you can get up there and say all of this, you know, radical gay stuff, and this whole room is like, yay. Like, I mean, it was, you know, I was brought to tears, really, right? To think like, I can be myself and like still, you know, be an educator. I mean, I wanted to be I ended up a professor, but I wanted to be a high school teacher. And I thought, well, I'm in deep trouble, because soon as it could be an issue, like soon as someone finds out I'm queer or whatever in a school, I could be, you know, because this would have been the 90s by this time, and it was not. Now we have out high school teachers even in Nebraska, but in the 90s, high school teachers were not supposed to be out.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and even still some today, some people are not even, they're still afraid.
Here in Lincoln, I'm always I'm like, wow, like, you know, most of the schools here, you know, because I work a lot in schools, they have gay straight alliances and, you know, various groups and things for students to gather and be supported and stuff. And, you know, those types of things did not exist when I was a young kid.
Yeah. Well, I think this is a great time to transition into, I believe you have a poem for us, right?
Sure. Yeah. I can read a poem from my new book.
Awesome.
I'm working on a book. I'm working on a book now called A Real Man Would Have a Gun. And I will read one poem from that, which is also, it's funny, we were talking about the 80s because it's sort of an 80s poem. The title is 1986. Papa Don't Preach hit the billboards. Our father said we couldn't listen to the song because of Madonna, because of pregnant teens in white dresses. But we listened anyway. Two rebellious girls, one of us less than half a girl, holding our kid palms over the boombox as if it were a gas stove for cold hands, waiting for the radio to play Madonna so we could press record. Own the song for no cost. We'd hoped they'd play it before my father got home, before his keys jingled at the door like a chorus of rusted wind chimes. We were best friends and 9, and already tired of being told what to do. Already grown stone sick of every cruel thing our fathers did to keep us from evil. We are about to find out that he's already home, already in the kitchen, mad about the music, mad about Lionel Richie and Billy Ocean and Prince and all the best pop stars two sunburned kids can imagine in 1986. But Madonna is about to take him over the raging edge. I want to tell them to plug the headphones in and share them, to tape the song another day, to slip out through the sliding glass doors and stay out long enough he'd forget what he heard, long enough for his whiskey to take to doing what whiskey does. But the two 9-year-olds, they love Madonna so much. They just hold their hands out over the tape deck, wait for the opening notes of the song to arrive, wait to be punished again for the things they love.
Dang. Yes, here's your applause. I know, I feel like with digital performances, you don't get the same feedback, but lots of snaps.
Thank you.
You said that's part of a new book that you're working on?
Yes, a new book I'm working on right now that, obviously still takes up a lot of questions of gender, but is also really focused on masculinity. There's a series in the book called Men Who Think I Am One of Them Speak. And it's about all the times in my life where men say things around me because they are either interpreting me or like kind of considering me one of them. And so they say things they might not say in front of a woman. And so I've been recording those things for a number of years, and now there's a series of poems about those things. So I know that all of my best guy friends are very nervous about this book.
So. I am excited to read it then.
Yes. So you've talked a lot about teaching and coaching and the youth you work with here in Lincoln. And as both like an artist and an educator. So what advice would you offer next generation of poets as they kind of start their journey as artists?
Well, I mean, one thing I'll say that I still notice happens, which is like when young people are interested in poetry, they often get discouraged by people saying you'll never make any money doing that, which was something that was said to me as well. And so I'm always telling the young people I work with, and I would tell young people who are interested in not just poetry, but painting, the arts, theater, whatever it is, that, what people mean when they say that is like, yes, it's rare to be a fiction writer and become one of the ones who's super rich and they make a movie out of your fiction, right? Like, sure, yeah, like that's rare. But on the other hand, my philosophy is kind of, you do what you love and you will find a way to make it of value. It might not be the conventional way it is made value of, but you will sort of figure that out as you go, so my biggest thing is like, what you love doing and whatever that thing is, and that includes if it's not the arts, if it's if it's STEM, if it's a sport, if it's music, whatever it is, that that kids should really be, young writers should really be encouraged to just like chase their passions. I run a youth writing camp at the University of Nebraska every summer called Young Writers Camp. This summer, we're going to do just like 4 digital sort of workshops this summer. And next summer, we hope to be back doing the 2-week camp on campus. But it's one of my favorite parts of my job is working with high school. As I said, I wanted to be a high school teacher, and I sort of ended up a college professor because I wanted to write also. And I knew that if I actually stayed a high school teacher, that I would get up at 6 a.m. and then I would end up, coaching the poetry team and coaching the softball team. And then I'd be home at like 8 at night and I'd never write another word as long as I lived because I'd be too tired. But I miss high school kids, and I stay connected with them through various programs here in Lincoln. And and some of the kids I coached, are like big leaders here in the community now, which is really cool because I got here in 2011. So some of the kids that were on the poetry slam teams I coached in high school, I just can't believe it. They're 25 years old, they're running programs, they're big time artists, they're all these things. It's so cool to watch.
Well, clearly you are impacting lives. And so thank you for, with the work that you do in the community.
Yeah, and that's something that I do some teaching artistry for Flatwater Shakespeare. And one of the things that we play with and explore are sonnets. And so getting to do a little bit, or I get like a taste of some of that firsthand, it is really, really fun to watch. Especially, I typically get the littles, like the K through 2, and seeing what they come up with is really fun.
Yeah.
Do you like any Shakespeare?
What's that?
Or is there any Shakespeare that you like, or are you anti-Shakespeare?
No, I'm not. I wouldn't be anti-Shakespeare. I mean, that's the gayest stuff around. No, but I'm not particularly versed in in Shakespeare or early literature. I'm my expertise is mostly in rhetoric and contemporary poetry for the most part. But I have great colleagues who do a lot of really cool work.
Well, and just having so many different forms and things to explore and yeah, it's cool.
Yeah, and sometimes people think of forms as like, confines, or like that people, if it's not free verse, then you're not like freely using your voice in whatever way you want. But actually, sometimes the form enables you to say things you wouldn't otherwise say, because it's kind of asking you to kind of think first about, the music or the line or the syllables, and you'd be surprised what people say when you give them some sort of like rules, so yeah, that's really cool.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much, Stacey. We really appreciate your expertise, your perspective, and for talking with us today. It was lovely, and everyone should go check out that camp and look for your upcoming book. You want to plug it one more time?
Well, I don't have any upcoming details for it. It's being finished right now, so
Okay.
I don't have any details. But if you go to you'll see if you go to my website, stacywade.com, when any books come out and stuff, it'll obviously be there.
Alrighty. Well, thank you so much, Stacey.
Awesome.
Thanks.
Bye,
everyone.
There we go.
Wow, it was great to get to talk to Stacey Moore. I feel like when I was working on Everytime I Talk About, it was very like, because we were still kind of like in the height of COVID stuff, so it was very like everybody was in and out. There wasn't like as much getting to talk and get to know people, and so it's really awesome to get to hear about her journey.
Yeah, and I didn't get to be a part of that project in the way that you were. So so yeah, I loved hearing from her too, and especially hearing her talk about like her experience growing up, and how that's changed, and what was impactful, and how poetry really was like an outlet that helped her shape her world. I think that that's really impactful, and for like any queer person who listens to that, or like who's watching this, like I think that they can definitely identify with that. So that was lovely.
Yeah, and getting to imagine the world as you want it, right? Or as you imagining the world you want to live in. And then something that my focus area is theater for youth, and something that we focus on is not only imagining it, but like how do you create that as well, which I know poetry is an extension of that too, and is focused on how do we create that world that we all want to be in. So.
Yeah. Oh, it's got my email. Alrighty. And for more emotional stuff, it's time to close out with our final fan favorite segment of what we're watching, so you can tune in on some of the best content the industry has to offer. And, when Brenna and I originally planned out what a typical Lunch and Learn episode would look like, we decided on this segment to promote new online content so folks at home could still get their arts and entertainment fix. However, as America and Lincoln, because go check out the Lead Center's website, you'll see some Broadway stuff there. As we open back up and we begin climbing our way out of this pandemic, I am beyond happy to take this moment to promote some in-person content for y'all. And today, I think Jane, you mentioned this earlier, but I'd like to shout out my favorite Broadway show, Hadestown. First show to reopen on Broadway a year and a half after going dark, which is like literally insane, because I don't think Broadway's ever been dark this long, because I'm pretty sure in 1918, influenza they didn't even know. They just kept doing shows. And they are reopening. Hadestown's reopening on my birthday, September 2nd. So if y'all are interested in contributing to my 23rd birthday gift, please email rsavage2@unl.edu to connect with me, and I will send you my Venmo, and maybe the two of us can, we'll go watch Hadestown, because I swore I was telling if Susan will watch this, but she'll appreciate the shout out. But I remember texting Susan, I was like, as soon as the first Broadway show opens up, I'm gonna go see it after COVID, and of course it's gonna be Hadestown. So
it has to be.
Yes.
I admire your hustle, Ryan. So what we're watching is also a live person event, which is exciting. So
Yes.
1 week from today, on June 8th, the Punch Brothers are performing with Nebraska's own Andrea Von Kampen at Falconwood Park in Bellevue. So as some of you know, mandolinist Chris Thiele, who performed a solo show at the Lead in March, is the front man of the Punch Brothers. And I had to miss his Lincoln performance, which made me sad. So I am so excited to groove out to their funky bluegrass sound in real life in my little socially distanced pod outside. So you too can listen to their music and purchase tickets for the show at punchbrothers.com.
I'm just picturing those little pens that you set up for dogs and babies, everyone just having their little dance party in that.
You can just see in there.
Yes, I've been to Falconwood. Falconwood's so much fun. Their drive-ins, those are the best for the summer. So you guys should check them out. The movies too. And finally, I feel like I said finally a lot today. There's still more finalies coming. If you enjoyed...
it is the last episode, so
yes,
there's a lot of finality to it.
Yes. If you enjoyed spending time with us today and this past year, we encourage you to donate to the Lead Center Ovation campaign to ensure the arts and programming like this remain an essential part of the Lincoln community as we climb our way out of the pandemic. You can find the donation link on our website. And that just about wraps up our final episode of Lunch and Learn. So from the bottom of all of our hearts here at the Lead Center, we just want to say thank you for joining us on this journey and for sticking with us through this, I'm going to say it, unprecedented experience. I hope these little moments of art once a month brought you as much joy as it brought us to make them. And we truly could not have done this without you, our patrons. So thank you. I cannot wait to see you all in person and seated beneath dimming lights at a Lead Center production this fall.
Yes, and Ryan, I have to thank you specifically for all of your dedication and hard work on this series. It absolutely would not have been possible without you. So thank you.
Oh, thank you, Jane. You're going to be sad. Thank you. I still remember we were thinking it up.
Yeah, right? When this was just an idea.
Yeah, when I was in my dorm room and everything, I was we all thought we were all gonna die. We're okay.
Yeah, well, and here we are on the other side.
Yes, alive.
Yes. I also need to extend a final special thanks to Stephen Colonna in the virtual control room, Lauren Durbin, Ellie Feiss, Quinn Sleddens, and Matthew Boring in marketing, and Sasha Dobson in the education department. This series would not have been possible without their support and hard work. And before we go, we have one last throwback for you all. This is one of the first virtual ensemble videos to go viral right at the start of COVID. And you can definitely tell we're losing it a little bit, but it's nice to think about where we've come from since then. So stay tuned to the stream for that content, and we'll see you at the Lead, Lunch and Learners.
Isolation blares in You Can't Stop the Beat.
You can't stop an avalanche as it races down the hill. You can try to stop the seasons, girl, but you know you
Hi everyone, thank you for celebrating with us today. Remember, the Actors Fund is not just for actors, it's for everyone who works in entertainment. If you can help, please give to the Actors Fund COVID-19 Emergency Relief Fund. And if you need help, please come to the Actors Fund.